So outside of the borders of the United States, very serious question, but aliens. So
I don't know.
Okay.
So we don't have any. We have no contracts connected with finding alien technology. So I guess it's possible, but I don't know. If you listen to the verbiage of what they're saying we just don't know. It's an unidentified object. Doesn't necessarily mean.
Can we
it's
find out? Because that's also terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It is terrible. Well, I'm sure the Department of Defense wants to know: is this a foreign country that has this technology?
Right. Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And make sure you share this episode with a friend or colleague. I'm your host, Owen LaFave, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Today's guest probably knows when you're sleeping, and he knows when you're awake. And no, he's not Santa Claus. It's Greg Celestan, the Chief Executive Officer of Celestar Corporation, a defense consulting company specializing in intelligence support. And no, he doesn't actually know when you're sleeping and when you're awake. Greg started Celestar after 20 years in the U.S. Army, following deployments around the world. He's a West Point grad where he received his bachelor's in engineering and Russian studies. So Russia. Do you know? Are you fluent in Russian?
I'm not fluent, but I'm conversational.
Okay, that's a hard language.
It's not fun.
No, I can imagine. Got your bachelor's in international affairs from the University of Washington. Of course, he's a Business Hall of Fame inductee. He served on multiple boards, really too many to mention, but Tampa General Hospital and, of course, Bank of Tampa, and is on the Power 100 list of the 100 most influential people in Tampa. Greg, welcome to Money Market.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So to level set everybody, what does Celestar do?
So we provide intelligence support to a lot of government agencies. It sounds sexier than it is, but most
CIA,
of my
covert.
Yeah, it sounds, the television shows really make it a little more exciting, but primarily 90% of my employees have top secret security clearances. Okay. We're providing analytical support. So we're really going through a lot of data. We're taking a lot of data and really turning it into intelligence. So we're analyzing really petabytes of information from different government sources.
So with kind of the onset of big data, how do you manage combing through all that to get useful information?
We use a lot of software, but the interesting thing that people don't realize is that our technical collection is unbelievable. We can collect a lot of data, but parsing through that data takes a lot of time and a lot of people to do that.
I can imagine. And then there's open source information out there as well.
Absolutely.
So from a strategic standpoint, like how do you utilize what's out there like in the general world?
So what we do is something called all source analysis. So we use open source resources. We also have classified means and technical means that we use, and we pull it all together into a product depending on what the client wants. So depending if we're looking at foreign terrorist organizations, or if we're looking for people who build nuclear missiles, we'll use different sources of information to build those products.
Oh, wow. So, how has the world and maybe how has your business changed since you started Celestar and with cyber warfare and disinformation and really the rise of non-state actors, which you think maybe 20 years ago really wasn't, maybe 25 years ago wasn't an issue?
That's a good question. So really the types of people that we employ now are a lot different than when I started 20 years ago. So when I started the business, really most of my employees were intelligence analysts, really people who did this all source analysis type work. But now I have data scientists, I have geospatial analysts, I have engineers. So, and this is where it gets really difficult for our business and for the government. It's one thing to find data scientists. They don't have a lot of those people out there.
Right.
Now tell me how many have top secret clearances. It's a lot smaller pool, so it's a lot harder to find the people and make sure they have the skill sets that we need to do the work that we need to do.
Now, are you hiring people that already have that clearances, or are you hiring people then taking them through that process to get clearance?
Usually we hire people who already have the clearance. They're ex-military or ex-government, and the primary reason is that we don't know how long it'll take for them to get a clearance. So you have to fill out this long, form and where you've been and your family, et cetera. So if I hired you and then we started to work and then we found out 2 months later that you had 20 trips to Havana and Tehran, well, you're probably not going to get a security clearance. I wouldn't know that ahead of time, and I can't ask you those questions ahead of time until you actually fill out the form. So we tend to hire people who already have the security clearance in place.
That makes sense. If what is the process like to get that clearance?
It can take anywhere from 18 months to 3 years, again, depending.
Okay.
So a lot of the government agencies, they like to hire people right out of college because for the most part, they haven't done anything exciting. They haven't really traveled. The older you are, the harder it is. That's why it's easier to hire people. But they'll ask you again, all the places you've been, what you've done, and then they ask for 5 contacts, and this is a little thing that they do. So they'll go to those contacts and say, who else do they know? And really what the government is trying to do is they're trying to verify your trustworthiness. So we always call it the axe murderer rule. So when you're filling out all these questions, they'll ask you, hey, have you ever killed anybody? And you go, no. And then they'll talk to 5 people and they'll go, oh yeah, this person, let me tell you what they did. So it's not that you killed someone or didn't kill someone, it's the fact that you lied about it.
Got it.
So just long as everything confirms.
Is like a lie detector test a part of the process?
Well, we do. We have to take a polygraph.
Okay.
We're required on most of our contracts. And so they'll ask us questions then too. And again, they're verifying that everything you said you did and all the places you've been, you're truthful about it, because that's really what they want to know, to make sure that you're trustful.
Yeah, to make sure you're being honest and trustworthy.
Absolutely.
Now, but it sounded like, if I was following you correctly, it's not necessarily the references, because everybody gives, good references.
Right. They're going to find other references.
Right. It's you ask the reference, who else do they know? And you go to them.
Then they'll go to those.
They're a little forthcoming, like all script.
And they just want to really confirm everything. People always think they're trying to dig into my background and see if I was, smoking pot or something. The government really, that's not, I mean, it is a concern, obviously, drug use, but again, are you honest about your drug use? That's what they really want to know.
So I know you hire people with government clearance already, but what about cultivating talent, making sure that talent's there? You do a lot of work internationally, so I'm assuming you're seeking talent from outside of the U.S. and then trying to cultivate and retain that talent as well.
It's a big part of what we do. So we spend a lot of time with our analysts helping them to write better, how to think analytically, how to think critically. And so we spend a lot of time training. We send them to training courses. We actually spend time with people to help them write better. And it's funny you mentioned about the international part. So we have, for example, a State Department contract. So we support governments overseas through the State Department contract. So we do have to reach out to other governments. I'll give you an example. We had a contract where we were helping the Senegalese stand up a female police force. So we needed a law enforcement officer who spoke fluent French. So we actually hired Royal Canadian Mounted Police women who were retired, who were fluent in French from Quebec, who had a law enforcement background, and we hired them to help set up this Senegalese police force.
Are you able to train critical thinking? I mean, you could teach people how to write, but to me, critical thinking seems to be one of those things that is critical, if you will, to like learn in your early formative years. I mean, is it something that it can be taught and refined?
You can help. It's difficult because really it's a lot of practice. And so a lot of the intelligence products, we get feedback. And a lot of times we're graded on some of the products that our analysts produce. Because they'll produce it, it's sent out, and someone will come back and say, well, this was helpful, this was not helpful because you didn't give me enough detail. So that helps us refine some of the products, and it helps us in our training. Yeah. Exactly.
What about things like AI and cybersecurity? Like, how have they changed the landscape?
Well, it makes it a little bit more difficult for our business, obviously. We have a lot more steps that we have to go through when we're handling classified information now and just normally our business. So if you go to our website, people always ask us, they go, we really don't know what you do based on your website. And I go, well, that's by design because the government really doesn't allow us to talk a lot about what we do, or even some of our clients for the government, we can talk generically, but we can't talk specifically because obviously it puts people at risk. Like we do work with Special Operations Command, but we can't tell about where we're sending our employees because they're supporting missions. So obviously we're very kind of generic.
It's going to be a short interview. I can't ask you any questions.
Oh, you can, but I just have to be careful about how detailed I go into.
I know you're a pro. You know how to answer. But I mean, are you using kind of AI in your day-to-day to try to improve efficiencies in the data sourcing? We
do to a certain extent, and mostly it's really to help us go through a lot of data. And if I could give an example, if we're looking, for example, if there's a a foreign group out there, and we think that they're manufacturing explosives, and they're using precursor chemicals that they use to do that, and we're searching for it. We would use technology to say, hey, what companies produce this type of material, and where is it being produced? Where should we look? So we'll use AI and certain things like that, but once we get to the point where we have to make some determination, there's a human involved, and we usually won't use AI then because we have to be very careful of, our source, and we can verify the information.
That makes sense. And in a scenario like that where you're collaborating with the U.S. government and maybe some allied countries, I mean, what is that? What is the collaboration? What's the communication process look like during that?
We have a very detailed process that we have to follow because it's kind of like being a journalist where you have to verify your sources. So we have to be able to go back in time. And if we're saying, hey, we think this is something you need to look at, because so the private contractors, we don't actually, if we say in this location, in this building, we think they're building a weapon, we don't go and kick in the door. That's for the U.S. government to do. But we have to be able to say, hey, we think there's an 80% probability based on this information. Look at our sources here, and we'll show you how we got there. We think you need to go check this place out. And so that collaboration that we use, there's obviously some governments we have where we share more information with than other governments, as you can imagine. And so that information is more trustworthy. Other sources, we would say, we don't have a high degree of confidence that this is very trustworthy. So, we'll take it with a grain of salt, but we think this is something we need to look at.
Do you know the results of that information, or do you hand it over and say, okay, there's an 80% probability, and then you have no idea what happens after that?
A lot of times we do know, because a lot of times we're part of the process. A lot of times if there's an operation going on, they'll keep the intelligence analysts informed because a lot of times it's dynamic. I'll give you an example. When we had operations in Afghanistan, we had teams that we called document and media exploitation. So we would say, hey, at this site, we think this group is producing weapons. So the special forces guys might go in and kick in the door, and they would grab, for example, hard drives. Well, we might have people who are with those teams who would immediately go through those hard drives and find information and say, hey, we need to go to this location soon because they might try to clear out that data. Let's go there because this data is leading us there. So that's real time, so they would keep us informed. Other projects, unlike TV, the thing I love about TV shows is they make it seem like all of this happens in an hour.
Right.
Some of these projects are 6 months of a year. We're staring and looking and saying, after a year of work, we might say, there's a 45% chance that they're doing something here, and we probably need to check it out. But we're not really sure because, again, they watch movies too. They know our technical means. So it gets more and more complicated because they're not talking on cell phones because they know we might be able to tap cell phones, or they're not using hard drives. They're using couriers and paper, and so it's very difficult to see what they're doing. So we don't know for sure.
Oh, you found out the risk of using pagers.
Exactly. Yeah, they won't be doing that again.
Either. And that was really incredible to see the amount of time in planning in advance
exactly.
that took to execute.
And that was probably years. I mean, when you think about that operation, that was years of planning and work to make that work. And that's usually in our business. And what you don't know is there might have been 5 other things they planned that didn't work.
Sure. Right.
You're seeing the one that was successful. And so that happens a lot too, but obviously we can't talk about the success or failures because it tips the hand of what we know and what we don't know. So we just don't talk about it.
Is there a percentage, and I guess every case is scenario and you make a subjective determination, but you said like 80% we're going in, 45, is it just really kind of dependent upon what the issue is and what the case is?
It is. And the government has to make that determination because it really, if you watch the movie Zero Dark 30, they talked about when they were trying to find Osama bin Laden and how the analysts were like, let's go. And the government's like, we need more information. We're not 100% sure. And then the government had to make that determination. We're going to risk it. Even though we're not 100%, we're going to go. So our client really has to make the determination. That's not really up to us.
How realistic was that movie?
It was pretty good.
Okay.
It was pretty good.
Felt good.
It was pretty, because the thing I loved is they showed the long timeline that it took to get to a conclusion where they felt, okay, we feel confident enough that we can do something. There's a lot of work behind it.
Is there any? Because I've watched shows with like medical, like Grey's Anatomy,
right?
And like you watch that with a doctor or nurse or somebody, and they're like, "This is ridiculous." Like, what are other examples of movies that you think are good examples and representations of like real life scenarios?
Well, here's what I would tell you. I would tell you most of the movies, the thing that I think is most unrealistic is they make it so much more exciting. So if I introduced you right now to 5 people who work for Central Intelligence Agency who do human intelligence, human or case officers, you would be kind of disappointed because they look very average. In the movies, they're all good looking, they're well built, everyone has, drives exciting cars, but in reality, that's the opposite of what you want. You want people who basically blend in. You don't want to stand out. You want someone who you would look at and go,
average Joe.
Average Joe. Yeah. And a lot of them are average Joes. That would probably surprise people more than anything else. Or again, they're not doing things that are really exciting because a lot of what you want to do is you don't want to be noticed.
Right. You don't want to draw attention to anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the movies make it a little bit more, and a lot of special operations folks will tell you, if we have to fire our weapon, we failed. Our job a lot of times is to do something, get in and get out, and they never even knew that we were there. That's really where the movies want to make it more exciting, that we're always, someone's kicking in a door or doing something like that.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on, Elon Musk and VCAC have this whole Doge agency they're putting together, and I can think of I don't know in your world, and I'm sure given your reputation and what I know of you, everything is on the up and up. But I think of specifically, like I financed some VA offices, and looking at the budgets and saying we got to use this specific paint, we've got to use this, and I'm like, oh my god, this is 40-50% more than what you could build it for, but certain specs, and with the whole like cost plus. Where you got that human capital, it's really kind of it's fungible.
Yeah.
Do you think that has the potential to impact? I guess maybe the overall defense industry, but you specifically.
It really won't affect us per se because we don't build anything. We're a service business, and we're heavily audited because we don't build something. So most of our contracts are 5-year contracts. We have to bid on them. We have to show the government, here's how we're going to do the project. Here's how we're going to manage it. Here's how we're going to cost it out, how we're going to pay people, et cetera. And that's really how they audit us, that we're doing something. I think there's a lot of, bloat in the government. We all see it. I don't know how effective it is because we all know too that it's very difficult to cut budget because, years ago, when they started building these large, like an airplane, for example. Well, a manufacturer is very smart. They build it in 14 different states. So there are jobs tied to it, and there's funding for local communities. So that's really the difficult thing. You remember when they had the base closure commission, the government, the military said, we don't need these 50 bases. It was the local governments and politicians who said, you can't close this base because there's 10,000 jobs. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There's so much money coming to the community. That's what makes it difficult, I think, and that's where they're going to have problems. I think not that there isn't a need to cut, it's just how and who is going to suffer when you make those cuts.
That makes sense. How about just general fluctuations in the budget? You mentioned every 5 years, and when you've got a new administration, you've got new Congress. What is that? How do you plan for that?
It's difficult, but our business really isn't affected by administrations because the intelligence world works a little differently. For example, a good portion of our budget is classified, so it's not even seen. So it's not even reported in what you see. And even in the defense budget, the part of it that we use because of the nature of the projects, for example, one of our contracts, we're helping to find where their foreign governments have mobile missile systems, for example. And I don't have to mention the countries. You can imagine the countries. So that goes on regardless of the administration. We want to know where those missile systems are, and we're watching it 24/7. So those contracts go on, and there's a need for national security. Matter of fact, a lot of our contracts have a stipulation in them that even if the government shuts down, we have to continue to do the work because they're national security, related to national security. So
the whole debt ceiling argument, you just forge ahead?
We have to, unless they tell us to stop, because you don't want to stop watching, foreign actors or exactly or something tied to national security.
Okay, so you're in 12 countries now, right?
12 countries.
You operate in 12 countries? Or is it more than
Yes,
that?
yeah, at least. There's a few
Okay.
more, but we have, for example, I have employees down on Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, Cuba. We've been down there for 10 years, providing support to
That fascinates me. That
Yeah.
base fascinates me.
It's just an
this
interesting
little
base.
carve out. Where
It is, flying there is very difficult because we have to go through Jacksonville, the military, the air base, or in Norfolk.
Okay.
So you have to fly on a military rotator flight because the base, and if you remember A Few Good Men, there's no contact with Cuba, the island. So there's a big fence, a minefield. The Marines man the guard posts, and so that naval base is an isolated piece of American soil on Cuban territory, but you can only get in and out through the rotator flight. So it's my employees down there. They say it's either the best deployment or the worst vacation. That's how they describe it, because it becomes kind of Groundhog Day. They love the work. They live in government housing. The ones who stay there, they love to scuba dive. They work on their advanced degrees, but
you're really isolated.
You're
right?
isolated.
I mean,
you can't leave. One of the best gyms in the world. You would enjoy it. It's the Marines there. I mean, because you work for 10 or 12 hours, and then you work out, you eat, and you rinse and repeat.
I could sign up for that.
You would enjoy it. You would enjoy that gym.
All right. So, given your extensive, military intelligence background, what do you make of the world today? I mean, it is. When I think of Russia, Ukraine, and what's happening with Israel and Hamas and Syria, and then China is potentially on a war footing with us, but taking over Taiwan. North Korea just fired another test missile, so Little Rocket Man is back at it. Like what do you make of the world in the situation we're in right now?
I would describe it as three-dimensional chess. It's
Okay.
very complex. It's a very complex. And the thing is, and this is what makes the intelligence world difficult, is that you're dealing with humans who are unpredictable. So, if you told me 26 years ago that we would be in Afghanistan, and I was a Russia specialist, I go, we're never going to put troops in Afghanistan.
Not after what you saw happen to the Russians. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Brits, if you study history, it's the graveyard of empires was the term. But look at what happened, or Iraq, or other places. So where will we be 2 years from now? I couldn't tell you. We could be in Central America. We could be in the Arctic. I don't know, because you're dealing with people who are unpredictable, and they look at the world differently. If you look at the Chinese as an adversary, they look in terms of 20 or 30 years in their planning. We're lucky if we do it in 4-year blocks of time. So they're able to do things we can't do, and conduct planning that we never would. So it's really hard sometimes to get into their heads. So we do have, that was one of the things that I studied for. I was a Russian foreign area officer, so we're taught to become specialists in our adversary's mind. We study the culture, the language. I spent a lot of time in the former Soviet Union. So the reason for that is when we get into a planning session, we can go, what do you think they're going to do? And we can say, hey, based on these factors, we think this is what they're thinking. And so we have a lot of people who do that work, but it's still difficult because, again, humans are unpredictable.
Humans are unpredictable, and I also think we have what you hear is one of the common critiques of the way U.S. Approaches geopolitical situations is that we believe everyone else's goals and cultural values are aligned with what we want, what we would do.
Absolutely.
And that's, as you know from studying Russia, it could be farther from the truth.
Absolutely. They look at democracy and they see it as chaos. They see it as an unstable condition, and it's not something they would prefer a firm leader, and they'll give up a lot of personal liberties for control and stability. That, for Americans, we would never give up our personal liberty to, for those that type of society. So it's hard for us to imagine or understand that, but they're very comfortable in that world.
Have you read the book, The 100-Year Marathon about China?
I have not.
That's one you did. I will give you my copy.
Please, thank you. 100-year marathon. Wow.
It took me it felt like 100 years to get through it, because I would get so frustrated. I'd read a good 10 or 15 pages of how we just have enabled and funded the Chinese government and economy. Just for decades, and how they have essentially put together a plan to get back at the West for the embarrassment of decades past. And it's a good read. I'll make sure I get that to you.
If I may paraphrase Lenin, he said something similar. He said, capitalists will sell you the rope that you'll use to hang them. So it's, it's.
Hopefully it's not the case. All right. Pivoting a little bit to something topical. The drones over Jersey and other states. Is there any intelligence that you are able to share? I mean, is it our technology? Is it another government's technology? Is it aliens? I mean,
Yeah, that's a good question. So here's the dirty little secret about my industry. So because we primarily support the Department of Defense, all of our work is outside the United States. We get training, as a matter of fact. We are not allowed to conduct any type of intelligence work on U.S. citizens, on U.S. soil. It's totally forbidden. I mean, if we're doing something and there's a file that has an American citizen, tied to it, we literally have to, stop, notify someone. We are not allowed to process any type of information that deals because
that's encouraging.
And I'll come back to your question, but it's interesting. We found this problem out after 9/11. We had to do more collaboration between the Federal Bureau of Investigation and domestic because, for example, Department of Defense will track a terrorist to a certain point and go, we're done with them. Okay, we'll stop tracking them. Well, if that person comes to the United States, that's not a Department of Defense issue. That now is a law enforcement issue. And when we're tracking targets, Department of Defense has a whole different outlook. They're saying, we want to take out this target or capture them. FBI says we want to arrest them and prosecute them.
Right.
So it's a whole different way of approaching things. So now going back to the thing of New Jersey, I have no idea because we don't do any work on anything inside the United States. So I have a personal opinion, but nothing connected to any work that we do.
What's your personal opinion?
I don't think it's my personal opinion is I doubt very seriously that I think it might be private actors who are using drones. I think a little bit of scaremongering. I don't think it's a foreign government per se. Because it would be very difficult. I mean, if it is, it's someone inside the country who is either a U.S. citizen working on behalf of a foreign government. But even then, I think it would really be difficult to determine that because we don't regulate drones. So we do have technology to take drones out of the sky but I don't think
I guess to that point, and I don't know, I mean, outside of like shooting it down with like guns or missiles, I mean, like electromagnetic pulse, I mean,
Absolutely.
To me, that would be the thing to just...
Absolutely. You can block the signal. We have 100 different technologies that
I wonder, at least from what I understand it, and I'm not actively involved in it, obviously, but like the Houthis in the Red Sea and some of their drone attacks, I mean, we're shooting missiles at them, which is just that's not sustainable.
Right.
Using the technology like that to take them out and blocking their signal, and it seems to be a lot more viable than taking them out with a cruise missile.
It is, but a lot of the technology you have to understand too is you're using sometimes a sledgehammer when you really want to use a scalpel,
right? And
that's what's difficult too. And again, I can imagine the problem that law enforcement is having in New Jersey is if you block the signal, you're also blocking a lot of the other signals. So it's not like you're in an area where we can just blanket the electromagnetic spectrum and say we're going to block all signals to take out these drones. Well, you've just knocked out cell towers and everything else, so it becomes difficult in a urban environment. Over in a third world country, it's a little easier to use that technology.
Okay, so outside of the borders of the United States, very serious question, but aliens. So.
I don't know. Okay. No, we don't have any. We have no contracts connected with finding alien technology. So I guess it's possible, but I don't know.
Well, it is kind of. I mean, especially when they're having committees and a task force studying it. And you hear these stories of General Faber and the Tic Tac and the fact that it just has mobility and technology. If the stories are true, if the videos are true, that the general public doesn't know about today.
Right. Well, see, and if you listen to the verbiage of what they're saying we just don't know. It's an unidentified object. Doesn't necessarily mean.
Can we find out? Because that's also terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It is terrible. Well, I'm sure the Department of Defense wants to know: is this a foreign country that has this technology?
Right.
That's
you
probably
do wonder. Probably China seems to be.
They've just launched. We have visibility they had in the New York Times about their 6th generation fighter jets.
Yes. Yeah. A little scary.
Yeah, I agree.
But. All right, moving on from the aliens, but how does the defense and intelligence community balance kind of the transparency with general public safety? I mean, because it is, you're walking a fine line. You don't want people to panic, even though we were just talking about aliens and no one seems to care.
It is difficult. I mean, the issue that we have that we're held to is sources and methods. So, I mean, you've seen from the movies, the government has a lot of capability to monitor foreign governments and do these type of things, but we're held to a high standard because you don't want everyone to know exactly what your capabilities are. You spend a lot of money, billions of dollars, to develop a satellite. And so you don't want to let your adversary know what that capability is. So that's really the high standard that we have. And I would say, I always joke, if you look at the president when they start their term of office, then you notice they're a lot grayer because they're seeing the daily intelligence briefs.
Poor Obama.
I know. You see what's
Trump,
out there.
however, even though
he's handled it pretty well.
He's eating fast food and drinking orange Fanta.
He seems to handle it pretty well. But there are a lot of threats out there on a daily basis. But I think it's not that you don't want people to know that you don't want to scare them. You just don't want people to know because you have to protect the sources and methods that you're using to track these groups, because every time you let them know about a technology, and you kind of mentioned it, but it's true, I assure you that Hezbollah won't be using pagers probably for the next couple of years. That, once that operation is over, they can't use that again. So that's why we're very protective of the technology and what we can do, the sources and methods.
Where do you see the trends over the next 5 years in the intelligence industry?
Obviously, we will be using, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, more AI, just because, again, the type of data we're having to parse and use, and people are more sophisticated now. Again, in the 20 years that we've been doing this, we've noticed the sophistication of tracking bad actors. And now with cryptocurrency and this type of environment, so I'll give you an example. 20 years ago, if you were maybe tracking a terrorist group who was moving funds, they may start in Pakistan and say, we'll ship $500,000 to Kenya. We'll purchase $500,000 worth of coffee beans. We'll ship those coffee beans through a shell company to Brazil, and we'll buy laptops. And we'll take those laptops and we'll ship them to New York through another shell company, and we'll sell them in New York, and now we've got funding in the United States for some, activity. I'm just using that example. Well, you don't have to do that now. I can just, purchase, 1,000 units of Ethereum and have someone through a website now have access to it. And, oh, by the way, we won't communicate through cell phones. We'll use a gaming device. Mm-hmm. We'll use, Tour of Duty and have the people we want to get on, and now we'll talk through Tour of Duty. Well, there's no way to track that. So it's more sophisticated now, and it's more difficult.
I think we just gave the terrorists a tip.
Oh, they already know. They're beyond that. That's actually been in a movie. If you watch the first season of Jack Ryan.
That's right. Yes, they were communicating through the video game.
Yeah, so
That's
it's
right.
out there. That's
right. That's right. I forgot about that. What about, so are you involved in like financial intelligence data gathering as well?
We do.
Okay.
We do. We have contracts that we do monitor. Primarily, if there's a foreign adversary group, we're monitoring how they're moving money around, because it's usually tied to some type of activity that we want to track, either purchasing weapons, shipping weapons, oil, or something like that. So, and a lot of times they're using different shell companies or different activities. So a lot of that, and that's kind of the work I was telling you that's really kind of boring. But most people could do it if, I'm sure people here in the Bank of Tampa would be very familiar with the work. It's just that it's classified because the government doesn't want to know who you're looking at and how they're looking at it.
Okay. What about cutting governments and economies off from the SWIFT system like it did with the Russians? Does that create an obstacle to be able to track those funds, or does it make it easier?
No, it just moves to a different area. A lot of times, that's the problem sometimes with, tariffs or sanctions. You just push it into, kind of like squeezing a balloon. It's going to happen. They're just, the Russians, for example, now are using, oil tankers that are off the grid, basically, that can't be tracked or that are registered in some country that no one really knows. And so they're still moving oil. It's very difficult to stop that.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you about community engagement. So Celestar is very well known at being very, very generous and very visible in a lot of community and philanthropic events. How do you view giving back to the community?
Oh, I think it's very important. I mean, we're part of the community, and that was one of the things when we started the company. We got heavily involved with the chamber to let them know, hey, there are defense companies here, and even though they mostly work at the base, they're still part of the community, and you want to engage them to be part of the activity. And so I just think it's important. I mean, we're supported by the community. The community has been good to us and all of the employees and team members of Celestar. So I think it's very important for us to give back.
Agreed. And obviously that's a big part of the mission here at Bank of Tampa as well. And then maybe finally, those aspiring entrepreneurs or vets that are looking to get into the defense contracting space. I mean, what advice would you give them in particular about developing relationships and getting the approval in order to get their foot in the door?
I would say be persistent. There's a lot of paperwork involved, as you can imagine. It's not easy, but once you're in and over the hurdle, it's really not difficult to deal with the government. I mean, we don't have issues with accounts receivable. The government pays us on time for the most part. You just have a lot of paperwork. I tell people, here's a good piece of advice, and it's a good pitch too. I would tell people, they always talk about when they're starting a company, they want to go out and find a lawyer. I say, no, you want to find a banker, because that has been the key for me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's very, very important. Matter of fact, my first banker is Terry McFadder, who's been with the bank, and he started me off when I started my company. And that's been really the thing that'll kill a young entrepreneur is you run out of cash.
Capital.
Yes.
Absolutely capital. Greg, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, thank you for this, though. This is a fantastic service, and thank you for taking the time to do this.
No, thanks for coming on. If people want to reach out to you, how would you direct them to do that?
I would tell them to go to our website, www.celestarcorp.com. You can reach us there. Always happy to talk to people, especially if you have a security clearance. Please reach out to us.
Yes, looking for good help, right?
Yes.
Well, Greg, thanks for coming on Money Market.
It's my pleasure.
If you have a question or future show idea, would like to be a sponsor, you can send us a message at moneymarket@bankoftampa.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram at Bank of Tampa and online at bankoftampa.com. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. We'll see you around in the Money Market.